be just a few seconds. Chairman, we're live.
Call this meeting to order. This is Corporations Part 2. First up for us is 9/11. Oh, actually, will you take roll, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Brown,
Present.
Representative Locke,
Present.
Representative Heft,
Here.
Representative Johnson,
Here.
Representative Lucas,
Excused.
Representative Webb,
Excused.
Representative Weber,
Excused.
Representative Yin,
Excused.
Chairman Knapp.
Here. Excused.
We have a quorum.
Barely, but we do.
All right, thank you. So first up today is Senate File 57, 9/11 reporting.
Mr.
Gentlemen, you
Chairman,
have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Nate Smolinski, and I am the 911 State Coordinator for Wyoming. I'm also the statewide interoperable communications coordinator, as well as the WYDOT Chief Technology Officer. I would like to preference in these meetings, I'm taking my WYDOT hat off. We're going to focus in on the first two titles there if we can. So just kind of as a reminder, this was an intern topic that we worked, and what 57 really does is we presented to this committee back in Lander and Evanston meetings, and really what it came down to was we heard from several local PSAPs, the public safety answering points, which are your 911 dispatch centers, and committee members. Forgive me if I speak in acronyms at times, feel free to pull me back a little bit here. But we heard from across the state regarding their challenges and some of the impacts to our citizens when the 911 systems were going down and they didn't have the outage notification they required to in order to notify their citizens, hey, if you need services, here's how you can get a hold of us. Our PSAPs have resources where they can reach out to the local citizens on several different platforms to inform them, we know when you dial 911, it's not coming through, but if you need something, reach out to us here. So what we did is we kind of took up this task. We worked with the PSC, which we'll hear from shortly, and we started reaching out to some other partners as well, specifically WASCOP, WCCA, WOES, and also the Public Safety Communications Commission, to start to see what we can do to try to help out our PSAPs and what type of notifications they require. We also took a look at FCC requirements to see if there was something there we could work with. And what we found, there's been improvements over the past year, which has been helpful, but they still really don't affect or impact Wyoming the way we need to. And just as kind of a little bit of an example, and this isn't the be all end all, but one of the requirements that the FCC states is that a notification is mandated if you hit 900,000 user minutes of downtime. So just kind of think about that. If we have a major outage on the cellular system, how that impacts areas of Wyoming. It could be literally weeks before that total might actually hit 900,000. So we recognized that this wasn't going to work out for what we have in Wyoming. We worked with the telcos as we move through this a little bit. And what we've done is we've actually kind of come up with a little bit of a framework. They've been very helpful coming to the table, seeing the need that we have here and how we can kind of navigate through this working together. We wanted to make sure that the expectations that the PSAPs have, as well as what we're looking for, can realistically be met by the telcos. So we didn't want to come out and say every time there's an outage for 5 seconds, you have to let everybody know. That doesn't make sense and it's not feasible. So by working together, we're going to be able to come up with a workflow and a framework that everybody can pretty much stand behind and work through here. What 57 does is it really allows the parties that I mentioned previously to work with the PSC to promulgate rules for the outage notification and reporting and some of the stuff that I just mentioned there. The other aspect to this bill is that we are looking at the second part of it, which is it's pretty lightweight, but what it does is it actually adjusts the date for when our PSAPs have to report their expenditures as well as the collection that they are having off 911 revenues. So that little fee that's attached to your phone bill, when that goes to the counties, we wanted to understand better how much you're collecting and then how much you're expending out of those funds. Currently, it was set up on a fiscal year. We've asked that it move to a calendar year. And the reason why we do that and why I'm mentioning it to it, it makes sure that the state of Wyoming is eligible for any federal grants that do come. We haven't seen any in a while, but we're keeping our eyes on them. But this makes sure that we are eligible for those grants should they come. We'll have the data. We're able to process it and get it over to the parties to be. And we're also asking that the Public Safety Communications Commission be part of those reports when they're generated. I'll probably close out by just saying this is part of a bill that we started talking about in the interim. There's kind of another phase to this that we're going to be looking to do going into next year, and that's going to be discussing the funding aspects as well as the migration to next generation 911. I'm not going to spend too much time with this group right now speaking about that. I just want to kind of plant that seed that we're hopeful to have some deeper and stronger conversations on this topic moving forward. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll be happy to stand for any questions before I ask Mr. Petrie to speak.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Okay, Mr. Petrie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Petrie, I'm Deputy Chairman at the Public Service Commission. I don't have a lot to add to the excellent explanation that Mr. Smolinski has given you. I'll just say that in our discussions with industry, we have committed to pursue a rulemaking that produces the simplest and least burdensome system that will get the timely and useful information to the local PSAPs. And that one of the reasons that we're here is because the Public Service Commission does have a regular practice of promulgating rules. It's often necessary, and so we're going to use that process and come up with the most efficient and useful system that we can. Other than that, I haven't a lot to add unless you have questions of me.
Questions? No? Okay, thank you. Are there any elected officials to speak on this bill? No? Any members of the public?
Hello, Mr. Chairman. My name is Alan Thompson. I'm the Executive Director of WASCOP, the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. And I would just like to echo the testimony that you have already heard. We've been part of that process this summer, and our members are the ones that operate those PSAPs. And this puts us in the right direction to, gather that data and be able to move forward with better data going forward. And I do have one of our chiefs online that would like to testify on this briefly also, but I would be happy to answer any questions if the committee would have any right now.
All right, thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any questions? The committee? Nope.
Thank you, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right, thank you. Anyone else in the room to testify on this bill? Any agencies? Any organizations? All right, online, do we have?
Yes,
Gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, we have one individual, Matt Johnson. I'll admit him now. Mr. Johnson, you can proceed.
Hello, Mr. Johnson. If you could identify yourself for us and we'll be ready for your testimony.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee. Thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time. My name is Matt Johnson. I have the privilege of serving the community of Torrington as the Chief of Police. I wanted to take just a moment and speak in strong support of this bill. Better notification of 911 outages and future opportunities for grant funding would make a significant positive impact in our ability to take care of our community and keep people safe. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the committee? No? All right, well, thank you for testifying today.
Thank you, sir.
All right, with that, I'll close public testimony. What is the pleasure of the committee? Representative Johnson and Representative Heft with the second. Are there any amendments? Okay, seeing no amendments, would you please take the roll on Senate File 57, 911 service reporting?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a roll call vote on Senate File 57, 911 service reporting. Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Locke,
Aye.
Representative Heft,
Aye.
Representative Johnson,
Aye.
Representative Lucas, Representative Webb, Representative Weber left an absentee vote. She did not actually leave an absentee vote for this bill. Representative Yin. Chairman Knapp.
Aye.
Chairman, you have 5 ayes.
Just enough. With that, Senate File 57, 911 service reporting does pass the committee. Next on the agenda, Senator, since you were ready, if you want to go through your bill here, Senate File 174. We could get you up and out of here. Welcome.
Chairman Knapp, committee, thank you. I bring you Senate File 174, Constitutional Apportionment 2. This bill's actually a pretty simple bill. It doesn't look so much, but it is. What this bill really does is it came out of our last redistricting, and actually it comes out of the last 3 or 4 redistrictings, to tell you the truth, is in particular Weston County, but actually all of northeast Wyoming, plus some other small counties have kind of felt left out, and they also feel pretty strongly that the Wyoming Constitution hasn't been followed, which clearly has not. I mean, it's not an arguable fact whether it's been followed or not, it hasn't. That comes down to the Supreme Court case, US Supreme Court case, the one man, one vote that basically negated Wyoming's Constitution. And one of their base questions was, if we're not going to follow it, why don't we change it or figure out how to follow it? And so I firmly agreed with it. It's been interesting. I've been on both ends of it. I was chair of the redistricting last time. So what we really did, we sat down with them and they came up with what I think is a very logical solution. First pass, everybody says this just doesn't work, but what it really does, it's an act relating to the legislative districts, and here's providing findings, which we usually don't do in a bill, but it's kind of necessary for a background in this one. Requires the management council to assign legislative apportionment to a committee of the legislature for study during the 2025 legislative interim as provided by the act, providing legislation to apportion the legislature based on the requirement this act may be introduced during the 2026 legislative budget session and providing an effective date. And so, the findings basically go through what I just laid out to you. It talks about the US Constitution, the Wyoming Constitution. They also go in and took a look at the founders when they did the Wyoming Constitution, and it was very clear that the founders wanted county lines respected in a very large way. And they wanted, at that time, and it's part of the Constitution, they wanted a representative senator in every county. And obviously, one man, one vote took that away from them. But the county lines, I can tell you, having chaired redistricting last session, we made no attempt to follow county lines. There might be some people that'll argue that finding of mine, but I won't, because I know you were there, Chairman Knapp, and a bunch of us followed it. we had a chance to follow county lines very close with very small variations, and the committee chose not only not to do it, but to add members. So goes through in the findings on it through the first 3 pages, basically talks about it and talks about what actually is said. So I actually going to go to page 3, the stuff before kind of falls in. Page 3, each county, and this is right out of our Constitution, shall constitute a senatorial and representative district, and this is still there, it's there today. Senate and the House of Representatives shall be composed of members elected by the legal voters of the counties respectively every 2 years, shall be apportioned among said counties nearly as may be according to their number of inhabitants. Each county shall have at least 1 senator and 1 representative, but at no time shall the number of members of the House of Representatives be less than twice nor greater than 3 times. Wyoming Constitutional, Article 3, Section 3. Also provides, first budget session of the legislature following federal census, legislature to reapportion its membership based on that census. Notwithstanding other provision of this article, any bill to apportion the legislature may be introduced in the budget session in the same manner as the general session. So this went on all the way up till 1992, and 92 is when the case came in, and we kind of started not following it. And they tried pretty hard right after 92 to follow county lines, and we've got further and further from that until this time. I can tell you for me, I'm probably an interesting example because I think I'm the only legislator since territorial times that serves 7 counties in Wyoming, because I ended up at the whole eastern side and then came into Campbell County. So pretty interesting. So as you go through it, it lays out the cases, talks about what it does, and then it talks about the Equal Protection Clause, which is where we came in to get to the 1 man, 1 vote. They don't do it. So then we get to the meat of the bill on page 5. So if you go to page 5, and on line 3, it said the legislature shall. It's not a may, but it's shall make a good faith effort to apportion itself as required by the 14th Amendment. That's following the U.S. Constitution, conformance to the principle of the vote of any citizen approximately equal in weight to any other citizen. Line 9, legislature shall make a good faith effort to apportion itself required by Article 3, Section 3, and 48 of the Wyoming Constitution, providing by legislative districts follow county lines and legislative districts that have at least 1 representative, 1 senator. Section 3 is the management council coming in and does the study and goes through that it can introduce legislation. And that's the entire bill. And this is just common sense. We're not locked up in a redistricting fight right now, which is normal. If you want to wait for 9 more years, I can assure you it's going to be contentious and tough. And I think this does something that needs done that goes far beyond what the bill is it forces us to look inwardly as a legislature of what we'd like the rules for redistricting to be. And I can tell you, having sitting through 2 of them, we tend to make those rules up at 2 meetings at the very start. We all fight and then we fall apart, and it's each man to himself. And I can tell you our redistricting last year was not done until the last minute of the last day in a back room, very much like the public does not like to see. I'm not happy about it. I was chair of the committee. I voted against redistricting. I thought we violated every rule we could. So I'm sitting here with you saying that I think this is the time that this bill gives a vehicle to put some sideboards on it. It also gives us a chance to say, can we or possibly can we follow the Wyoming Constitution? If we can't, we probably should bring a constitutional amendment to make our Constitution so that all of us, I see it on the floor every day, we hold it up and we talk about it, and it matters. It matters to everybody. And why should we have a Constitution that you hold up that you say, I willingly do not follow it, and it's very hard to explain to your constituents why we tell them that the Constitution is the only thing that matters on the base level, and then try to explain to them why we're not following it. So for me, I think this is common sense. It's not, doesn't force anybody anything. Everything in here shalls, and it gives us a chance to look, and we may get to a point that we say we just can't figure it out. That may be a logical solution. But hopefully we come down and say, at least for me, all of our money, when we fight on the floor, all you folks, you fight for your towns and your counties as a whole. That's what we fight for. So why in the world would we split them into pieces and force you to represent parts of them at the time? And once again, I go back to personal thing. My first 8 years, I represented all poor counties that had very little mineral wealth, all ag people. Pretty simple to represent them. You get up in the morning and you're talking about cows and cowboys and rural towns. And then all of a sudden we redistrict and I got put in with Campbell County, and I'm telling you, it's been great for me. It's a great county, great people. But representing one of the wealthiest counties at the same time that you represent two counties that are hardship counties is a tough order. And I know Chairman Knapp understands that, because when I'm sitting and you're asking for things for a wealthy county, the poor counties can't figure it out. And the flip side of it's this. I can tell you, Campbell County, Laramie County, Natrona County have been unbelievably nice to the little counties. For where I sit, I got to be president of the Senate because of big counties. I also got all kinds of things for Northeast Wyoming that they didn't have the representation to have. So I'm not saying it's unfair, because I disagree on that. I think we've been treated probably just the other way. We get, because the dollar amounts are smaller, we get treated better. But I think this bill helps people understand and gets the state in the right place. With that, I'll stand down and stand for questions and ask you for your favorable consideration on it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Thank you, Senator, and I think you've done a great job representing both ends of that spectrum. So I know that I was not around in corporations during redistricting, but Minority Leader Yin was. And I think we'll get both of you a T-shirt that says "I survived redistricting," and all I got was this lousy T-shirt, so. My question is, does this follow along with redistricting? Basically, it just gives us time to research and work on it and prepare, or would this be something that can happen separate from redistricting?
Mr. Chairman, this would be separate. This is where we're away from redistricting, and I think what it really does, and like I say, the first issue is the Constitution, one man, one vote, and can you actually find a way to make it work? And in my own belief, the answer is no. You just can't. Niobrara County and Albany County, it doesn't work because of the size of them. So you got to figure out, is there an alternative you can find? But the real one is for all of us to look inwardly and say what matters in redistricting the most. And by doing it right now, 10 years from now, I would venture to say that 2/3 of the House and half of the Senate won't be here. So you're actually laying out without bias for what your job is, what the rules should look like. And I can tell you, I'm no different. When you look, you live in Crook County and you say, oh my God, I'm going to protect where I'm at. I love my people and I love my constituents. When you're in redistricting, you're obligated to fight for that. This will happen when we're not in redistricting. So you can sit down and say, a decade from now, what is the right thing for the districts? And that may look different than it does 10 years from now, or I believe that. So I think, Weston County helped me into this. I tried it early on, couldn't figure out how to do it. They figured out how to do it. Really a great group. And they're the people that ironically just came after me voraciously because they disagreed where everything fell. I've learned a good lesson doing it, because I think they potentially have got a thing that doesn't just help small counties, it helps the entire state to make sure that our representation is really fair and our lines are fair. And I think logically we're going to come to what should we really be trying to do to make it where the representation's fair for our constituents and does the best for forward and policy for Wyoming. I think it's a huge opportunity.
All right, questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Minority Leader Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator, so we did pass out of committee Representative Speaker Nyman's bill. Is this basically exactly the same as that one? Oh, great. Then I will vote the same.
Yes, sir, they're the same. We mirrored the bills. I'll be honest, Mr. Chairman, committee. We both felt like it was important enough that we'd both run them. And I don't care which bill passes. It's literally, for me, this truly is a constituent bill. This came directly out of the people. It didn't come from me. I'd love to claim it in hindsight that I did some really cool engineering on this one. I didn't. What I did was got woke up in the middle of it of what it really potentially could do.
Follow up? Any other questions? Representative Lucas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Driscoll, I'm just curious, would you see as the biggest challenge to enacting this bill?
Chairman Knapp, Representative Lucas, just you as a committee and you as the floor is, this bill really is, you rarely get to see in legislation bills that are just mays. There's no shalls in this bill. It doesn't force you to do anything. They're all mays. And so what it really says is, we'd like to force a committee, and we should be able to do it without a bill, to be honest with you. But it's really putting together good minds to figure it out, and it's all mays. This is really a think tank of how we can look at a better way to do things and follow the Constitution. And that's the other part. I think it's tragic, and I look at all of you, the freshman legislators here. We really do. We hold up the Constitution. We all read it. And how tough is it for someone that wants to follow the Constitution to explain to them, yeah, we follow it, except. That's a terrible word. We follow it, except we don't follow it in this case. And I think we ought to, in all cases in our Constitution, if we're not following it, either start following it, or we should be running amendments that say, let's take that section out or change it. Because I'm one of the ones, I want my kids and grandkids to be able to read that Constitution and say, I read it myself and understand it. And I'm guaranteeing you, high school age kids would have a very hard time understanding this Article 3, Section 3 right now.
Follow up? All right, any other questions? Vice Chairman Locke?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. I did want a little clarification, just because it says this in the fiscal note. It talks about it as an assumption that the Management Council will assign redistricting to a current standing committee. Now, that verbiage isn't used in the bill, so I just ask that I didn't get a sense from you that the intent is to force a redistricting early. This is an attempt, and I'm just asking for clarification, actually, sorry, sir. So I'm just asking if this is just an attempt to get the information that might be then considered for redistricting.
Chairman Knapp, Representative Locke, no, and I missed that in the footnote. In no way, the Constitution, once again, if you follow, it's clear. It comes after a federal deal. And my belief is this bill should not dictate redistricting. It may run another bill that comes off this. They may come up with findings, and that's what it says. If the findings say that we think certain things should sideboard the next redistricting, I can tell you, if I'm around next year, I'll spearhead it, because I would have loved to chair redistricting that had a statutory set of rules that says this is what we expect you to follow as best you can. It would have made my job a lot easier. It took me 5 or 6 meetings for my committee to tar and feather me and boil me in a pot, because I literally lost my committee in the middle of it. I've always considered myself a decent leader. I lost my committee. They beat me up, allowed a lot of other people to beat me up. And I don't wish that on my worst enemy. I really wish I'd had a set of rules that said, we're trying to the best of our ability to do this. I hope you folks can help us get there.
Follow up?
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, committee.
Is there anybody here to speak on this from any agent? Secretary of State's office. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Rubino. I'm the Policy Director and Counsel with the Secretary of State's office. Really appreciate this bill. The Secretary is currently testifying across the hall, and so he just wanted me to come over as we did in testifying in the mirror bill. And this, I think actually they were on the same day in the House of Origin, if I recall. And so we were back and forth, and I think there were a lot of folks from concerned citizens of Weston County, northeastern Wyoming. We've spoken a lot with them, and I just wanted to convey to the committee that the Secretary is hugely supportive of the bill. Thank you.
Great. Any questions for Secretary of State's office? All right, thanks, Joe. All right, any other members of the public?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Marguerite Herman for the League of Women Voters here. And I apologize if you've heard me speaking before on this topic of one person, one vote, so I'll try to work through it pretty quickly. This is a study bill, and I just put a question to you. Don't we already have the answer? Although it is hard for the people, and the good people of Weston County showed up, and they were very sincere and passionate about having their own senator and then 2 representatives, but I don't think there's any way around one person, one vote. And I know it conflicts with the Constitution. And I'll point out what you probably already know is the vast difference of counties in Wyoming. You're in Laramie County here, we have 110,000 people. Niobrara County's at the other end of the spectrum, they have about 2,500 people. So it's just a little indication that, so right here we have 38 people per square mile, and Niobrara County has 1 person per square mile. And I can do other statistics, but you get the idea that we're just a state that we're blessed with a lot of, with the military and state government, et cetera. Niobrara County is blessed with wide open spaces and a great agricultural culture, and both beautiful places, but government represents people. They don't represent acres. And so we're talking about the idea of 1 person, 1 vote. And I did a little math that if indeed it were possible to say, get those numbers for Niobrara County and obey the US Constitution, we are talking about, so again, the premise is 1 vote is the same in both places, equality of the vote, the weight. We would have 460 representatives and 230 senators, and a chamber that holds only 62 people. And so I don't see any way around that. It's by the numbers. A House district is about 10,000 people, Senate district about twice that, and there's just no way. I don't think that Niobrara County is going to gain another 7,000 residents before the next, although it could happen, but I kind of doubt that that is going to happen. So I guess, again, I think we already know the answer to the question about can we do both? Can we fit this situation? And I'm going to read a couple of things I have here, and I'll go through them really quickly because I know the hour's late. So in the U.S. Supreme Court decision called Gray versus Sanders in 1963, the Supreme Court Justice William Douglas wrote in the majority opinion, the concept of political equality from the Declaration of Independence to Lincoln's Gettysburg Address to the 15th, 17th, and 19th Amendments can mean only one thing: 1 man, 1 vote. So I kind of adapt that to 1 person, 1 vote. And what I have here also is the decision that was actually referenced by Senator Driscoll. There's a case it was filed in 1991. The decision came down in 1992 that kind of resulted in the system we have now, Gorin versus Carpin. And I'll just a couple, I'm going to read, once again, I'll try to be very quick. Let's see, I'm sorry. One of the things that got addressed, and I watched the redistricting efforts, and I applaud that committee. They racked their brains and tried, I think, every permutation of slicing and dicing up the state possible, and they tried to listen to everybody and accommodate everybody. But it was one of those things where if you tweak one thing at one end of the state, rippled through and changed everything. It was a difficult task, and I think they did a pretty good job. But the idea was that someone could not represent 2 counties, 2 either very similar counties or 2 very disparate counties. And you'd be interested to hear and the Supreme Court, the Wyoming Supreme Court did consider that. And what they wrote was, the difficulty of representing constituencies composed of competing interests is a fact of life for lawmakers at every level. Whether election district lines are drawn on the basis of county boundaries, city boundaries, or school district boundaries, lawmakers represent diverse interests. The legislature's position appears even more illogical given the high degree of diversity that presently exists within the counties the legislature so fervently protects. Laramie County is a good illustration, and it goes on to talk about the diversity between the eastern and the western part of Laramie County. Got Pine Bluffs at one end, Cheyenne at the other, and senators and representatives from Laramie County must reconcile these differences, different interests on a daily basis. And so it presents a challenge, but we have some excellent lawmakers at the legislature. And I've been watching this body for 45 years, and some excellent people who are able to represent very disparate people within just their town they live in. Okay, and I will just read one other thing here, again, trying to be quick. Let's see, I'm sorry. Equal representation is the, quote, high standard of justice and common sense that the founders and the United States Supreme Court have set for us. While it may not be possible to draw district lines with mathematical precision, that is no excuse for ignoring our Constitution's plain objective of making equal representation for equal numbers of people the fundamental goal for the Wyoming legislature. The cardinal democratic principle of one person, one vote should not be viewed as an obstacle. The legislature is constitutionally obliged to pursue fairness, not to exploit the exceptions. The Constitution does not permit a state to relegate considerations of equality to secondary status and reserve as the primary goal of apportionment the service of some other state interest. And so I as a resident of this populous county, I think my vote should have the same weight as the vote of any other part of the state, any other citizen of the great state of Wyoming, whether it's urban or rural. And so I would say that, again, it's a study bill. We kind of know how the answer is. There probably might be a benefit to get the public involved in the educational, informational effort, but I think we already know the answer to the bill, and I would, to the question that will be studied, one person, one vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Yes, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Herman, the founders of our country, the United States of America, they saw fit to see equal representation within the Senate, to have 2 senators per state. Wyoming has approximately 580,000 people. New York has many millions of people. And yet we have 2 senators in the state of Wyoming and 2 senators in the state of New York. Do you feel that that's not equal representation?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ms. Herman.
That is, there is a discrepancy there, obviously, but what we're talking about here in this case, and I will say, just parenthetically, and I've been asked this when I talked about this before, is that actually the league does support the national popular vote, so that which kind of riffs off the idea of the Senate, 2 senators for every state. It is a situation over which I have no control, and that's the U.S. Constitution. I'm talking about the U.S. Constitution in terms of the equal protection. But my focus right here and now, I'm not going to solve that tonight, and I know Wyoming is a beneficiary of that inequality. But right now, we're talking about a basis of districting the state and accommodating within reason 60 or 70 people. I don't think we can actually do more than that. So our districts can only get so small, unfortunately, or fortunately. And so the Constitution with the equal one person, one vote, and what we want to do with the counties is just, it's just crunch time. I don't think there's any way to reconcile those 2. But, we can look at it, I guess. But as I'm saying, we already know the answer.
Thank you. Any follow-up? Representative Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Knapp. And Margaret, I just did some quick math. And if we had 23 senators and we can't have more than 2 representatives per senator because we don't have 79 spaces in our current House, we would stack them up. So it'd leave us with 56 representatives. That's about 60,000 voters or citizens per legislator. So I'm just trying to bring out the math of the whole problem here. It's an enormous undertaking right now. So I just wanted to bring that up for everybody.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just explain the math that I did. If Niobrara County had 2 representatives and 1 senator, nested as we do now, that would be, 1 seat would be about 1,250 people, and divide that into our population, and that's how I got the numbers I did. It's interesting, I used to teach a Legislature 101 class, and we talked about the constraints. We have a beautiful building, but it's only so big, and I think, we added 2 people to the House last time, from 60 to 62 people, and I just don't know how many people we could squeeze in that space and provide the desks and the space you have now. You may say it's an artificial constraint, but it's a constraint it's a practical we have to think about.
We're looking into bunk desks.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Chairman, I would say if you all want to sit down, there's going to be an issue, but I mean, and so it is kind of a tail wagging the dog, but it's just a fact that the chamber we have, there's just limitations, how many seats.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Are there any other public testimony, any organizations on this bill? All right, anyone online?
Mr. Chairman, no, we don't have anyone online.
All right, I will close public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure? Minority Leader Yin. The motion. Representative Johnson, second. All right. Are there any amendments to the bill? Nope, seeing none. Please take roll on Senate Bill SF 174.
Thank you, Chairman Knapp. This is a roll call vote on Senate Bill 174, Constitutional Apportionment 2. Representative Brown?
Aye.
Representative Locke?
Aye.
Representative Heft?
Aye.
Representative Johnson?
Aye.
Representative Lucas?
Aye.
Representative Webb?
Aye.
Representative Weber submitted an absentee vote of aye. Representative Yin?
Aye.
Chairman Knapp?
Aye.
Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
With that, Senate Bill SF 174 does pass. Thank you, Senator Driscoll. All right, thank you. What do you think we should do first here? It's pretty thick. All right, next up we'll have Senate File 172. Senator Boner,
Thank you.
Physical Therapy License Compact.
Yes, thanks, committee. Appreciate you taking this up at such a late hour. But here we are. This is a physical therapy licensure compact. The idea being, background, this is a constituent bill from somebody in Douglas who's a physical therapist, you may imagine, and wants, to make it a little bit easier to do business in our state. So what this bill does is it reduces the regulatory burden on physical therapists through this multi-state compact. And so for a little bit of background about the compact, it currently has 38 members, 38 states have already joined. And the basic idea is that we still have our board overseeing the work going on in the state. However, instead of, if you get somebody moving in from out of state, instead of having to go through the whole process of applying for a license, you can, if they're coming from another compact state, they can just go online and pay a nominal fee and receive this, the ability to do work here in Wyoming. So it reduces regulation, makes it a little bit easier when folks want to come and do this vital work to go ahead and make Wyoming just a little bit more business friendly. So like I said, the way it works, if you go, onto the compact's website, basically you have the list of all the states that are members, and you can, they charge a fee. It's usually $150, and you can simply get a license in that state. It's all these states working together to ensure consumer safety the same way a licensing board always does, but relying on each other for enforcement. So now this is a compact, Mr. Chairman, and so I could go through it line by line if you want.
Please
But
don't.
the reality is it's a take it or leave it proposition. The way this works, the only way this works is that if we all agree to the same rules, right? It's one of those compacts where, you have to agree to the rules to sign up and provide this convenience for our citizens. There's 12 different sections dealing with anything from definitions to active duty military personnel. I highlight some of the ways that this commission works. It's actually favorable to our state, that every state gets one vote. So it's not a population-based thing where we'd be, basically voiceless. It'd be like the U.S. Senate, where we have equal footing with other states, regardless of how big or small they are. Like I said, it's been received favorably so far. I think there's some concern, just being transparent with physical therapists, that this would provide for more competition for them. I think that's a good thing, especially in any sort of medical environment where, we probably need more competition, the better. So that's the bill, Mr. Chairman. It's kind of a broad overview. I don't want to get into too much detail, but I can certainly stand for questions.
So Senator, that was going to be a question that I had actually, because when we look at compacts, typically it's when we're dealing with shortages in the state. I understand the competition aspect, but are there areas in the state where we're short on physical therapists?
Yes, according to my constituents, who's a physical therapist in rural Wyoming, it is a challenge to get people to come here and work, and that was the impetus of the bill. So I don't have any real facts or data, I'll be honest, but I'd say it's be consistent with all the challenges we have with healthcare throughout the state, or especially in smaller towns. It is a challenge to get folks to move here, and if this is still something we can do to help, then I think this is worth our consideration.
All right. Vice Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. How has it, in terms of the compact rules, the way they currently sit, how much of an impact is it? How much of a difference is it to existing rules that might be in place here in Wyoming?
I hope we have somebody from the department that oversees this particular board, but they thought that they could administer it just fine, and they're well acquainted with these sorts of compacts. But I'd leave it to them to. I hate to speak for them. It's been about a month since I presented this bill, Mr. Chairman. So, but that's why I recall that they're capable of administering it. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Minority Leader Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So, Senator, we have a physical therapist in our body, and he sent us an email, and he said that, what did he say? He said 27 out of the 300 members of their chapter were surveyed in favor of the bill. So it sounds like physical therapists are generally against it. One of the things that they noted was that it would mean all of the current out-of-state licensees would no longer pay the license fee in Wyoming, so they would pay it to the compact privilege in their own state. Did the Board of Physical Therapy, or I don't know what board they report to, I assume it's the Board of Physical Therapy, talk about how much the fees would go up for the in-state members for the licenses?
Senator.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, so they would charge a fee to the out-of-state folks. It'd presumably be less. That's why I mentioned, if you go on the website, you pick your state, and it's usually $100 or $200, so that they can still charge a fee. It varies by state. As far as the so-called lack of support, that survey was open for a grand total of 3 or 4 days. And my constituent asked for the bill was not on there supporting it. So I would hate for the committee to think that, just because you only got like 10, 15% support, that 85% are against it. I think 85% didn't take the time to respond. So that's not an indication one way or the other of support within the community. Like I said, that my constituent who asked for it wasn't even on the list of people who supported it. But that's an example of, I think, the concern that your colleague shared with me is about, in particular, this could open up for, in theory, like a telehealth with physical therapy. I don't know how that would actually work. And that's why I think that the concern is not quite, I think it's a little misplaced because you have to be there in person. And it's a consumer choice thing. If somebody thinks they're going to get something out of online physical therapy, I guess they can do that. I'd hate for the state of Wyoming to stand in the way of them making that choice. So that's the arguments against it. Certainly, I've been talking to your colleague quite a bit.
Follow up? So I know how some of the other compacts we've had before work. Would this affect the Wyoming Board of Physical Therapy's ability to have direct authority over the licensures, both for discipline or anything like that?
No, Mr. Chairman, the way that it works is that the licensing board for the state still has to go out there and enforce all the provisions, all the standards, the consumer protection elements of it. That remains in effect. In fact, that's the only way that the compact works. You're relying on other states to enforce their territory and enforce the standards. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Is there any agency that wishes to speak on this? Any members of the public? Is there anyone online?
Mr. Chairman, no, there is not.
All right. Let's close public testimony. We'll look at the bill. Are there any amendments that you might have found in here? Oh, I'm sorry. What's the pleasure committee? All right. Representative Webb? Second? Representative Lucas? All right. Are there any amendments to the bill? I don't know that you want to go page by page in a compact. Nothing? All right. With that, we will take roll on Senate File 172, Physical Therapy Licensure Compact.
Thank you, Chairman Knapp. This is a roll call vote on Senate File 172, Physical Therapy Licensure Compact. Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Locke.
Aye.
Representative Heft.
Aye.
Representative Johnson.
Aye.
Representative Lucas.
Aye.
Representative Webb. Representative Weber submitted an absentee vote of no. Representative Yin.
No.
Chairman Knapp.
No.
Chairman, you have 6 ayes, 3 noes.
Okay, with that, Senate File 172 does pass the committee. Next up, we have Senate File 190. President Beitman, sorry to keep you waiting, sir.
Hey, we were meeting with your leadership, so we missed our.
What a
scheduled
pleasure
time here.
that would be.
What's that?
I said, what a pleasure that must have been for
It
you.
was, it's been a busy day, Mr. Chairman. Senator Bo Beitman, Senate District 21, Senator Salazar, what district are you?
Senate District 26.
26, and we bring you election transparency, Senate File 190. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, this bill has been a long time coming. We've been working on this since last February. We missed the cutoff for the bill introduction on this particular bill. We did a TV interview with Steve Bannon and Naomi Wolf on this bill, and we promised that we would be bringing it this general session, and here it is before you. This bill tackles 3 important election items. First and foremost, requiring paper ballots. Second, U.S. citizenship to register to vote, proof of citizenship. And we go into hand counting ballots, and we raise that threshold for hand counting ballots. So I'll give you kind of a brief summary of where we're at, where the bill started, and where we've kind of ended up through the Senate Corporations Committee work, which was good. They did good work on this bill, and it's been improving as it's gone through the process. Mr. Chairman, this bill aims to enhance election integrity and transparency in Wyoming by requiring the use of paper ballots for all in-person voting, and establishing mandating hand counts, recounts under specific circumstances, and enforcing proof of U.S. citizenship for voter registration. Additionally, the bill adjusts election dates and creates an election recount account to pay for these hand recounts, and incorporates amendments throughout the process. So where we're at, the engrossed version versus the original version. So what we did in what am I trying to say? The Senate Corporations Committee made some edits. Specifically, something was brought to our attention during our testimony on the Senate side. It turns out Laramie County uses touchscreen machines. They're the only one in the, it was testified they were the only ones in the state that use a touchscreen. It spits out a paper ballot, but it is a touchscreen. And there was conflicting language with our original bill. So we put in on, you'll see on page 2, paragraph B there, that's the carve out for Laramie County to continue using what they're using as long as it's producing a paper ballot. Because the idea with paper ballots is obvious. We want a paper trail. You want to be able to whether it's pen and paper or whether it's a touchscreen, you want to be able to make sure that the votes you cast are correct before you stick it in the box. And we were assured from Laramie County that that would continue to be the case with those touchscreen machines, that as long as they produce that paper ballot that's auditable, and it would comply with this law. So that's the big change there. The rest of the bill, honestly, you go into section 2, where it's all conforming language of existing statute. That's where we get into on page 4, where we throw in what proof of United States citizenship means. So paragraphs A on page 4 all the way through F on 5 and J on page 6 is all what constitutes U.S. citizenship. Now you'll see on the middle and bottom of page 6 where we had to change the election dates. That was something that I really didn't want to do. It was brought up by LSO in my bill draft request, but I wanted to maintain the current election dates. Thought that maybe the county clerk could just make it work. Well, I was overruled by my body in the Senate, and they moved the election date from the third Monday in August, first Tuesday after the third Monday in August to the first Tuesday after the second Monday. And so they moved the primary up a week to accommodate for any possible hand recounts that might need to happen, and gives them time, if needed, to coordinate those hand counts. So it would move up the primary. Turning over to page 7, again, more conforming language. Page 8, conforming language. Page 9, conforming language. Page 10, unless ballots on line 7, new language that says unless ballots are tabulated by electronic voting systems. Then it goes on. Because most counties use, you stick your ballot into the counter, it tabulates it for you. We're not changing that. It does, when you get into the hand counting portion of the bill, you'll see where there's opportunities to redo those, recount the machines, and then if you want a hand count, you can request a hand count. Let's see here. Page 11, county clerk shall appoint a counting board for the purposes of completing recounts as provided in the section we created. Counting board under this subsection shall consist of not less than 3 members. Additional counting board members may be appointed if deemed necessary by the county clerk. And then you'll see, my goal was, in my original bill draft, was to shrink early voting down, because I felt early voting was way too long. My goal was to knock it down to a week or 2, because we still have absentee voting. If you want to vote absentee, Mr. Chairman, you still can. We do that for our military. We do it for everybody else. But the early voting down at the courthouse, I thought, come on, if you can make arrangements to vote early within 2 weeks of election day. Selfishly, as a candidate, you go out door to door. Half the time you've hit doors in July and they've already voted.
Right.
right? And so you may not even had a mailer go out yet, and people are voting on basically no information, whether it's just name ID. I guess it's an incumbent protection racket. It benefits incumbents to have, you know, wide open early voting, but I don't think it benefits challengers at all. I mean, it's just, but long story short, we landed on 21 days. So we lopped a week off the early voting, and that's why you see that there. And then we move on, trying to find anything of me. I know it's getting late and I don't really want to read this whole bill to you, back to you. You guys can read. Page 16, you'll see the threshold from 1% to 2% to trigger a hand recount. That's substantial. And then, yeah, the last part of the bill just talks about the hand recounts and what we're gonna do there. I'm trying to see anything else. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'll
Thank
stand
you.
for any questions. I think that pretty much covers it.
I had one on the date change, Senator. So with LSO's concern, did that date change affect any other statute or conflict with anything that we have currently?
Mr. Chairman, no, I think the date change was just to be out of abundance of caution, and so they'll have time to turn around for the general election. They put that extra week in there just in case.
And then I think we'll hear from testimony from the Clerks Association. I'm a little curious as to the Laramie County situation with touchscreens and how that will affect this bill. So are there any other questions? Minority Leader Yin?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. President, I kind of wish we saw this bill earlier because I feel like we would have saved a lot of debate on the House side if we had just this one bill. Are there any other bills outstanding that you think that this would conflict with, other than the ones that are definitely like the same bill? I know we have a couple of other House bills that dealt with elections. Do you have like a list of ones that this one conflicts with?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yen, I do have 3 bills that I didn't bring out that dealt specifically with this, but there was 3 separate bills. The thought being, and I talked to the sponsor, that we've got to start deconflicting bills in this place because we've got multiple bills of the same subject flying, and it's using up precious staff resources and precious time, and we've been debating the same bills for hours and hours and hours. So there are 3 bills. One deals with hand counts, one deals with paper ballots, and one deals with U.S. citizenship. So all 3 of those are addressed in this bill. And so it's much easier just to deal with one bill than it is having 40-some bills flying through the process at one time.
Mr. Chairman, could I have 45 seconds?
Absolutely,
Thank you.
Senator. Ready, go.
To that. Mr. Chairman and honorable members, this bill is supported by the Senate. The bringer of the bill has taken a great deal of time and a lot of interested party, talked to a lot of interested parties to tighten this bill even tighter. I know this bill does not do everything. It was not intended to do everything. It was crafted to do specific things well, not everything in a rushed and sloppy manner. It is what it says to do. It does it well in a narrow, focused way. Thanks.
Thank you. Question on page 15, at the bottom, line 19. There's a House Bill 249 that's out, and I'm not sure if it got out of committee, but on the line 19 where it says the second Friday following the election, in House Bill 249, it says second Wednesday following the election. And I don't know the status of 249 now, but do we want to have that conforming or?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know what House Bill 249 is. Do you know the catch title? Runoff election? Okay, yeah, that just, to my knowledge, it just passed out of committee today, correct? And it's been re-referred because it has a substantial appropriation, so it's going to go to appropriations tomorrow. I haven't, I'm a co-sponsor on that bill, but I haven't seen what you guys have done to it yet since
Okay.
it's come over, so.
All right.
But we'll take a look at it, and we will have to, Mr. Chairman, there are a lot of election bills out there that we are running out of time, and we've got to start deconflicting these bills and making sure that they're not in conflict with one another. It's gonna be a mess at the end here. We've got to sort these all out and get them done. But we will take steps to make sure that that's happening.
Thank you. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman Knapp and President Whiteman. The Laramie County touchscreens, they produce a paper ballot. Would you envision the whole state going to that? And then in relation to that, you would be able to use machines to count the ballots, but you would still also have the paper ballot that you could hand count manually. Is that something you would consider? Is that, I mean.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not sure I'm following it, but the idea behind this bill, plain and simple, is to enshrine in the law the mandate of use of paper ballots across the state going forward to protect Wyoming into the future. How you get the paper ballot, whether it's a touch screen that prints one out for you, or you take an old-fashioned pen and you circle a dot on the ballot, we still want paper ballots no matter what. I think that's the gold standard for election integrity across the world. I don't want to get away from that. That's why we're bringing this bill. Some counties, you'll probably hear testimony that it's very popular. They like it. They like the touch screens for whatever reason. As long as it coincides with this law, if this were to become law, I'm okay with it, as long as there's an auditable ballot trail that we can audit. We can hand count these ballots if we need to. And whether or not, in my county, up in Sheridan County, we do a pen and paper, check it over, make sure you don't overvote, undervote, stick it in the machine, it tabulates it. Machines are tested by our county clerks, and you guys know the whole process. But if they need to be hand recounted, you still have the paper ballots to do so. And that's what we want to make sure is enshrined in law forever.
Follow up? All right, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next we will hear from the Secretary of State's office.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate you hearing this bill at this late hour, Senate File 190, election transparency. You know, there's really four buckets this bill falls into, three of which originated in House bills, with the engrossed version of House Bill 157, proof of voter citizenship, the original version of House Bill 245, pen and paper ballots, and the original version of House Bill 232, hand counting for recounts. Now, there is a small fourth bucket, which is amendments to 22-9-125, governing alternate procedures for casting, collecting, and counting absentee ballots. Now, you know, will say that I'm a big fan of single subject and you know, and I think this has moved towards the election omnibus approach. I'm certainly in support of the bill, but there are a number of reasons, you know, the Wyoming Constitution and also in terms of vetoes, that it is good to separate out bills. And so certainly understand this approach and supportive of the concepts in this bill, but it's one consideration to consider as we move forward with the omnibus. Now, on proof of citizenship 150, which is originated in House Bill 157, this is a huge priority of our administration. It's been a huge priority at the federal level with the SAVE Act, and requiring proof of United States citizenship is just a really important provision that we have at the registration process. We had rulemaking that would move towards this direction. It was unfortunately vetoed by the governor. So I think codifying proof of citizenship in statute is very important. And the originator on this, House Bill 157, really used the provisions of the SAVE Act. And in this bill, that was the same in that sort of box that's within this bill. Now, on the pen and paper ballot requirement, which originated in House Bill 245, this is really important in that, we need to have what 22 of 23 counties do as the default method is that they use sort of pen and paper ballots rather than the touchscreens. Now, there was an amendment over in the Senate that sort of weaken that, and maybe Mr. Rubino, with your indulgence, can allude a little bit more to that amendment. And we'd like for the provisions on this, on pen and paper ballot, to more align with the House approach of the bill that went over to the Senate and was not introduced. Because the important thing here, and in Senate committee, we were not persuasive on this, but when something prints out, when you use a touchscreen, we go back to this debate from the second week. When you use a touchscreen and it prints out a paper ballot, that's all well and fine. But in Laramie County, it is not the names that is casting the ballot. It's the barcodes. And I really appreciate the head nods here because those that vote in Laramie County, and I'm one of them, starting this last election because I'm a qualified elector in Laramie County now, know this, and the question is, do the barcodes align with the names below it? And that's why we had the provisions in House Bill 245 that made it out of the House. And unfortunately, that was weakened in a number of ways over in the Senate. Do you want to speak a little bit to that, to Mr. Rubino, and to our amendment to align it more with House Bill 245?
Mr. Rubino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Rubino, I'm the Policy Director in Council with the Secretary of State's office. I think that the Secretary nailed it with that. What you saw, with the timing of these bills and what you saw with the original bill, which there was actually a mirror amendment that was brought on the House side. There was a vibrant debate on that. The House did reject that amendment. That amendment was adopted in the Senate. What this deals with, and if you go to House Bill 245, as it is engrossed, and then on page 2, the difference between those two drafts really deals with, the Secretary talked about the 4 buckets, and Chairman Knapp, you were the prime sponsor of 245, but what was discussed in committee, what was discussed on the floor with those amendments was what the policy is. So if the default is the pen and paper ballots, which really is 22 out of 23 counties, now they do have express votes at their locations, but it's really one county, Laramie County, where that is sort of the default, for lack of a better word, the method of filling out your ballot. And so there was an amendment brought in the House and the Senate that changed, and what you'll see on page 2, it's on line 16. Beginning with line 14, subsection A of this section shall not prohibit any county clerk from providing electronic ballot marking devices for use by electors who choose to use them. The original language was subsection A of this section shall not prohibit any county clerk from providing electronic ballot marking devices for use by persons with disabilities. And the difference is really the policy that it was setting, right? And we spoke to this extensively, that the default method is pen and paper ballots, and then you have the explicit carve out, which is what the vast majority of counties have, which is an ADA accommodation. If you cannot physically do a pen and paper ballot, then you have the express vote ballot marking system. Really, it's setting the default for all 23 counties, and I think the effort that was discussed in committee was that it was really to set forth uniformity. We've talked a lot about this with that amendment, and again, it's not on the House bill, but on the Senate file, I'm not sure what this bucket does anymore because there is no default method, which was the policy choice of what that was sort of trying to effectuate with, at least with House Bill 245. With this, if it's up to what anybody wants, I don't know. It may incentivize it, and it may incentivize electronic ballot marking devices, and it may not, so.
And I have a question on this, because President Beitman talked about the ability to, with pen and paper, to have that audit capability, to be able to go back to paper and say, this is what the vote was in that audit. In the case of Laramie County, under testimony, that seemed more difficult because you do go by the barcode for the reading of what that vote was cast, and you really don't have a way of going back to what would be a pen to paper type of ballot to audit that with. And we don't have source code, and we don't have, it's a proprietary system. And so can you answer that in respect to the importance of having that capability?
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. And we've been through this a couple times, and it was about 4 weeks ago, so I really appreciate you getting back to this because it's a really important distinction. When you have a touchscreen that prints out these ballots, it is not the name below it that casts the vote, it's the barcode. And so, yeah, if you're gonna have a paper ballot that you're gonna audit, you're not auditing the names, you're auditing the barcodes, which there's no way to really unpack that, at least easily, like you said, Chairman Knapp. And so, certainly we want to comply with federal law for disability reasons, and comply with federal law for persons with disability, but to put this in the hands of the elector, this is an election integrity issue. And so it really should be a decision for a policy of the state that we're going to require these pen to paper ballots, and not a decision for the elector to make that we're going to opt out of this security measure that the elected representatives of Wyoming have decided is very important. We don't allow electors to opt out of voter ID because they decide that they show up to the polls and say this isn't something that they think is convenient, or they prefer to, it's the same concept that we're allowing them to opt out of having that paper trail because they decide they really want to move forward with that touchscreen. It's just an analogy there, but that's why it's important to go back to where House Bill 245 was in its original form. That's what that amendment that we passed out does.
So I'm curious, for other counties with people with that disability aspect, do they use a touchscreen system at all other locations, just in case somebody has that, or what's used in other counties?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, they have these touchscreens at the locations, and it is done in those instances, but it's not the default in 22 or 23.
It's the rarity, it's not the default.
Exactly. And
Okay.
so we're complying with federal law, but it's not the default. We're certainly not allowing electors sort of the choice. I know they do in absentee voting sometimes, maybe in some counties they are in same day, but it's by no means the default.
Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I had that question, and you can continue with your testimony.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think we talked a little bit about the pen and paper ballots. Now we move to hand recounts, the provisions in the bill on that. The pertinent changes to 22-16-109B, which details the process for triggering automatic hand recounts, specifically Romanet I, which requires that for federal, statewide, or legislative offices in which the difference between two candidates is less than 2% in that county, then there's an automatic recount. And in Romanet II, that if the difference is less than 1% in the entire state or district, then there is an automatic hand count. And then the same principle applies to the automatic recount of a ballot proposition, providing that a hand recount of a statewide ballot proposition will be undertaken if the proposition receives a number of votes greater or lesser within 1% of the number of votes required for passage, and for local, if the proposition receives a number of votes greater or lesser within 2% of the number of votes required for passage. And Second, I would highlight the recount as requested by a candidate under 22-16-110 would specify whether the recount should be conducted by hand or by machine, giving the candidate the option. And on the appropriation and deposit requirement, they're very interrelated. It's sort of a balance we strike. And there was a negotiation with the county clerks on the originator of this, which was House Bill 232, hand counting for recounts to get to the right balance. And I do think largely we got to that. You know, I have some concerns on some of this reimbursement for county buildings. You know, I mean, they're already using it for polling places. So is the state going to reimburse counties for, you know, the use of a county fairground, which they're already using as a polling place? But we're not bringing an amendment on that. I think some of that came in on the Senate side. The other thing that folks had expressed some interest in is amending in drop boxes, since it's become largely an omnibus bill, which the drop box bill was considerably weakened over in the Senate. It had basically became a drop box sort of codification bill in certain instances. We'll see what happens. We did draft up that amendment. There were some people that there are some folks over on the House side that had expressed some interest, and since it's become an omnibus bill, in bringing in some of these bills that look like have passed the House, that you know, that have gone through the process and are proceeding. So that's one consideration for the committee to have. We did draft that because some had expressed some interest. I did talk to the drafter beforehand, and he seemed to say that he was not inclined to support that, that he viewed that as a more difficult thing to pass through the Senate. But certainly this is on the House side at this point, and leave that to the committee. But we did go ahead and draft that because we just want to bring through these election integrity measures. And here we are at the 11th hour and have a bill that's been said to be an omnibus. And so we certainly bring that to you for your consideration.
Minority Leader Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So the Dropbox question, are you worried that if we add the Dropbox language to this bill, we will create a situation where the Senate won't necessarily agree with that, and then it'll go to conference, and you create more risk the further we go there?
You know, Mr. Chairman,
Secretary Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I used to be a legislator, and this process is always fascinating. You know, it's in the House right now, and we have a bill that is an omnibus. And basically, it's 3 House bills with one other concept placed in the Senate file. And so it begs the question, should other House bills go, you know, what's the line? And, you know, I don't want to speak for the drafter. We just had a conversation out there, and he mentioned that, well, the line is, these are things that the Senate think are easy lifts or that have consensus over there. I'll leave that to you to make the, you know, ultimate decision, as it is in your hands. But I would pose, I think Dropbox is a slam dunk. I really do. And so I think that, you know, we continue to have the debate, and amendments are made, and it's an interesting process. Representative Yin, I don't know what the Senate is going to do one way or another, just like I don't think they know what the House is going to do. It's a fascinating process, isn't it, Representative Yin? And we continue to work on it and enjoy working with you. And thank you.
Follow up? Well, certainly, it does combine several bills into one, and the title you could fit maybe all 45 bills into it. But I do think that it would create some difficulty in passing the more that you place into the bill. That's the danger of omnibus bills. But if this is more focused on the pen to paper, the auditing, and that's the point I'm most concerned with. I'd like to dig deeper into this Laramie County issue, because I do believe that amendment is important. Because if we just leave it as an option for people, I think that would be a problem, don't you?
Well, Mr. Chairman, certainly for changing that, I mean, you know, I think that that's an important thing. Some had expressed some interest, so bringing it, and I certainly support continuing to add in these election integrity measures. If we're going to have an omnibus, let's truly make it an omnibus. But that's just my opinion.
All right, other questions of the,
And I also don't want to speak for the sponsor. I don't know if he wants to get back up. You know, we had a conversation out there, and I wanted to add in that he had expressed concern.
we will probably out of courtesy let him take another bite at the apple. So any other questions for the secretary? Committee? Nope. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one thing I do want to add, we do support the bill, support these three concepts, very important. And, appreciate, they always say imitation is the best form of flattery. So really appreciate that we have a vehicle that has bills in there. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll keep the decorum. Okay, so Clerks Association, we'll have you up next to speak on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we go back to physical therapy? Mr. Chairman, my name is Malcolm Irvin. I'm the Platte County Clerk and also the President of the Clerks Association. To my left is Deborah Lee. She's the Laramie County Clerk, which I believe she'll talk a lot about some of the questions you had. First thing, Mr. Chairman, I want to say, it's becoming increasingly obvious that there's a number of election bills that won't make it to the finish line. And so if you want to get something done, we're at the point that this may be the vehicle. And so, Mr. Chairman, our task, the way we see our role, is to help you get it across the finish line. If that's your interest in getting this passed, we want to make it workable. A few things, I know that Clerk Lee will talk quite a bit about the touchscreen concern, the audit concern. I think the one thing I really want to mention, if we're concerned about how those ballots are tabulated or audited, we really need to work on the testing and the auditing statutes. In fact, that's one of the interim topics we submitted. We have a sincere interest in strengthening testing and auditing procedures. But when you use that ballot marking device, it prints a ballot out. So those on election day who voted for Representatives Brown, Johnson, Lucas, it had their name printed on it. The tabulating equipment might not have read, okay, that's Brown. It read a position, just like your bubble ballot does as well. It's not reading that Brown, it's reading where that bubble mark is. It's reading a location. And so, Mr. Chairman, when we do a hand audit or hand recount, we're not recounting the barcode. We're actually looking at that ballot and saying, okay, it says Brown or Johnson or Lucas. And so we still have that ability in a hand recount, and that's why this is doable. Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to ask a question right there if I can.
Sure.
So when you're filling in a bubble and it reads the location of that bubble, it's very different on if it's the receipt that I've seen that you receive or the paper that you receive from voting on a touchscreen. You've got barcodes on the top. You've got names down below. But in no way do you know that that corresponds location-wise or even matching up that barcode to a name. It just simply lists barcodes at the top, names on the bottom, correct?
And Mr. Chairman, my answer is yes, but could I expand on that?
Yes.
That answer, okay. So the answer to that question is yes. But in our testing procedure, that's why when we fill out that test deck, there's a unique number per candidate. That's how we know that it's counting that ballot correctly. A vote for Chairman Knapp was for Chairman Knapp. Additionally, in our post-election audit, we're able to go through and actually see in the cast vote record that that ballot was cast, the elector voted for Chairman Knapp, and that's how it was counted. Now, I would actually argue that the ballot marking device is stronger in terms of an auditing procedure and a recount procedure because there's no mismark. There's no concern about whether the elector filled in the bubble, X'd it out, or circled a candidate or something like that. It's just clear. That's what they intended. was that, that individual. And so there's no issue of trying to discern intent. And that is one of the things that will be a challenge in the hand recount, but that's why we specifically say there has to be rules promulgated. And if this is passed in this session, it gives us approximately 14 months to work on those rules. Mr. Chairman, I would love to say every voter fills in the bubble perfectly, but that is not the case. And so we are going to have to really consider other scenarios where people are marking their ballots.
Chairman Locke? Co-Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So quick question on those touchscreens, and I've never used one. So, but on those touchscreens, in the testing process, how accurately is that tested to validate? Because touchscreens are what they are, and they are no more accurate than the guy filling in the oval, to be perfectly honest with you. And that's been proven over a long range of time electronically. So I'm sort of curious about that. How robustly is that process tested to ensure that the touchscreens are even doing what they're supposed to be doing? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Locke, I actually really looked forward to having this conversation when your testing bill came up, because I think it offered some items that we want to really explore in the interim. That could we do better? Yes. Are we dedicated to doing better? Yes. We want strong testing and auditing procedures. That's why we submitted it as our #1 interim topic concern. To date, so Mr. Chairman, that's a long way of saying to Representative Locke, it can be more robust, absolutely, and we would love to get it there. And we do believe there's time. In terms of 2026, through this interim, we plan to work alongside you. We hope that you all take that up as a topic so that we can really talk about that testing procedure and get something really robust.
Follow up? Okay, continue, please.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, a couple of other things I just want to cover in some questions or some pieces that were brought up. Why did we advocate to move the election week 1 week forward? The timeline between the primary and general election is very tight. State law requires we have ballots in our possessions 45 days before the election. There are times between the primary and general, we get them on day 45. That means we didn't have time to test those ballots before they went out to Uwakava voters. And so we're always going to advocate we have a little bit more time to get those ballots to make sure we test them before they're sent out. That's just the way the law is written now. They have to be in our possession 45 days. We send Uwakava ballots 45 days in advance. So because we moved canvassing back 1 week, we wanted the election 1 week earlier in the calendar year so that we didn't compress that timeline even further. I hope that is clear in what I'm trying to convey. That's why we advocated for that. Mr. Chairman, you had asked about House Bill 249, page 15, line 19 says second Friday. We would like to keep it second Friday. I've talked to some honorable senators about an amendment in House Bill 249 to move that canvass date from the Wednesday to Friday. So we're in that mind frame right now of trying to get those two bills copacetic along with the others that are out there. So, Mr. Chairman, we would ask that you not amend that portion of this bill and let us work on House Bill 249 in terms of the canvass date. But I do have, Mr. Chairman, 4 amendments, and I promise it's not a rewrite of the bill. They're simple. I know you've had some discussion about that today, and so I don't want to wade into that. So with your leisure, Mr. Chairman, we'd like to go through those. Page 2, at line 20 through 23. This was discussed in the introduction of the bill, that Laramie County is in that unique situation where they've been using ballot marking devices as their primary method. Going back up to line 16, I apologize. We would like to keep this language in there. One concern, and I know you heard us say it before, we're concerned about policing the disability question. If somebody presents and says, I just want to use it, we don't want to dig into whether they've got a disability that qualifies. I will say from experience, I do have voters in my area who would not qualify if it said disability, but they prefer to use it because they're not confident they can mark in that little circle as well. So I have voters who actively choose it. And so I would ask that you err on the side of the choice of the elector there. But on lines 20 through 23, we would ask that you strike beginning at nothing on line 20 through 23. That would still allow the Laramie County administration to continue. And again, if we have concerns about testing or auditing, let's talk about that in the interim and really get it robust. The second one, Mr. Chairman, is page 6, lines 1 and 2. This is a very interesting one that Clerk Lee identified. In the amendment would be on line 1 after draft record, insert showing a place of birth, and then striking the balance of line 2. We have a handout for you regarding selective service and military draft records. The interesting thing is you don't have to be a citizen. Actually, the handout we have for you specifically says that if you are a permanent resident, refugee, undocumented immigrant, or dual national U.S. citizen, you shall register with this selective service. And so showing the selective service acknowledgement card doesn't prove necessarily you're a citizen. It just proves that you did your duty. And so we would ask for that change just to strengthen this and make sure it does what we want it to. And I apologize, Mr. Chairman, we didn't catch that earlier, but we earnestly want to get this across the finish line if that's your intent. Page 12, line 6 and 15. I know that there's some discussion about this, and this is certainly a policy decision. And so we fully recognize that this is in your hands as a policy decision. We, of course, would advocate that we return to the stricken language. This is where President Beitman talked about that early voting period, moving it down to 21 days. In the previous session, we moved absentee and early voting from 45 days to 28 days. And we had a lot of people compressed in that 28 days. I know Clerk Lee says her office handled on average 600 people per day in that time frame. And so now we would be compressing it even further. But Mr. Chairman, a different viewpoint on that is actually uniformity. This is specifically talking about absentee polling places. That's those counties that have a machine set up in their office during early voting periods. Not all counties do that. And so some counties would just be issuing absentee ballots as they are now, 28 days prior. And then some would have 21 days. And again, they can still get that absentee ballot, cast it, put it in the envelope, and give it to us. But Mr. Chairman, recognizing that is certainly a policy decision, and we respect that. But our request would just be to return to the stricken language and deleting the inserted language. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, and then I promise I'm done, unless you have questions, would be page 24. Maybe. On line 11, strike the words "or required by Wyoming Statute 2216-109B" and insert that on line 15 after 2216-109D. This is actually something your chamber considered earlier. Second reading amendment on House Bill 232, sponsored by Representative Haraldson, did just this, and it was passed by the House. What this did was it allowed for the county to be reimbursed essentially for any hand recount. So this is the automatic trigger of that 2%. Now, if the county clerk or county canvassing board calls for it, that's on us. We pay for that. This bill says that. All this would do is that cost of hand recounting would just be reimbursed. And so, Mr. Chairman, with that, that's all I have. I know Clerk Lee has more, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do you have those proposed amendments all together on one?
Mr. Chairman, if you could possibly make heads or tails of that, I do. I would be happy to get you something much better than that.
Clerk Lee, do you have any other comments you'd like to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have one suggested amendment as well. On page 12, line 2, And on page 12, line 10, strike the word public. And the reason is polling places on election day are not required to be public buildings. Many are churches, they're halls, clubs, community centers, or in small counties, even a home sometimes. So striking the word public would align with what currently occurs on election day. And it would certainly provide greater flexibility for us to identify suitable facilities. Malcolm mentioned our large volume of early voting, where over 600, on average, over 600 people per day were voting early. And we had 5 days in the general election where over 1,000 people came through our courthouse. We don't have room to expand. I mean, there's no more space we could go. And we're very limited on facilities, and I inquired of the county attorney, could we rent someplace? And she said, well, you know, that statute says public building, but she said statute doesn't define public building. And we got in a discussion about how problematic that was. So that's the reason for us suggesting this as an amendment, to give the clerks more options for locating facilities.
All right.
So I'd like to thank the sponsors for bringing this bill, because paper ballots are indeed the gold standard, and I think it should be enshrined in statute. And I'll talk about our ballot marking devices. I am convinced that they make our voting more accurate, and they ensure that voters have the correct ballot. We use vote centers, so you have many different ballot styles at any polling place. And because the ballot is issued as the voter checks in, that really helps ensure they're given the correct ballot. Where we have paper ballots and someone has to go to another place to get their ballot, the chances of a judge making an error and handing the voter the wrong ballot are significantly higher. And in fact, we've had counties that have had to redo elections because a large number of voters were given the incorrect ballot. Teton County was one, Sweetwater was one, and I believe maybe Sublet was one, where enough voters were given the incorrect ballot, it caused a material error, and they had to repeat that election.
Okay, Representative Weber, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Clerk Lee. What years did that happen?
The Teton one was, I was at the Secretary of State's office at the time. So the Teton and Sweetwater cases were between 2012 and probably 2014.
Follow up?
No,
Okay.
no more.
All right.
Thank you.
Representative or Vice Chairman Locke?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So question for you on this. So it sounded like you're saying that with these ballot marking systems, somehow the ballot that the elector gets is, you're more confident they're getting the right one. Is that what I heard? And that being said, can you explain why there's more accuracy in that process than there is in the process of handing them a ballot? That would be very helpful to understand. Not ever having used that, I would be curious how those two processes are significantly different.
Clerk Lee?
Chairman Knapp, yes, it is significantly different. And the way it works in Laramie County is a voter checks in and it's electronic poll book. And then the minute they're checked in, this small printer prints out the code for their ballot style. And that is handed to the voter. They then go over to the ballot marking device, insert that, and their ballot comes up on the screen. So it's very much tied to their registration and what party they are registered with, what address they're registered at.
Follow up?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, Representative Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Knapp. Deborah Lee, I appreciate that, but at what point does the barcode get printed on the ballot? Why couldn't you put the name on there instead of the barcode?
Clerk Lee.
Just,
Chairman Knapp, it does have the district and precinct on there. And it does say like REP if it's Republican, according to my recollection. And we're limited by what could be printed. But that is tied, and then they put it into the device, the marking device, and it does then pull up all the information on the screen.
Follow up.
but I'm saying that the ballot that they get out of the touchscreen, why can't you have that candidate's name on there so that they know that it's not a barcode, it's I voted for Steve Johnson? Thank you.
Clerk Lee.
Chairman Knapp, when they actually cast their ballot, that's when the name is printed. The name is printed on that.
Follow up.
I'm sorry, thank you, Chairman Knapp. It's printed on the ballot that you take over the machine that counts it.
Yes, Chairman Knapp, yes, sir.
Clerk Lee, yes. And I think maybe to clarify, the tabulation machine does not read the name, it reads the barcode. So, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's a great distinction to make. What I was going to offer to Representative Johnson is, what we could have done better is provide you a sample. And I apologize for that. We should have done that. We'd love to do that in the interim, of course. But Mr. Chairman, when the voter's given that ballot, it's a blank ballot. So one benefit of it also is we get to use that from cycle to cycle. If we have 10,000 of these blank ballots, we have 9,000 voters come in, we have 1,000 we can use in the next election. We can't do that in a normal election, with a normal bubble ballot, of course. And that blank ballot, once it's inserted, the voter makes their selections. At that point, it prints those barcodes at the top that the tabulator is reading, but it also prints at the bottom, here were the voters' selections. The difference is, on a bubble ballot, you're seeing Representative Johnson and whoever Representative Johnson ran against. On that touch screen, the ballot marking device, you're only seeing the selection that voter made. I hope that clarifies a little bit. And that's why, Mr. Chairman, when we do a hand recount or an audit, we're still able to see what that voter cast. And the voter's able to see it as well before they put it in the tabulator.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Lee, I hear the narrative a lot that the reason we want to keep these machines in Laramie County is because they're very popular. And as I campaigned 2 years ago for a person for sheriff across the entire county, that's not what I heard. And as I campaigned in this last election for myself in my district, this is not what I heard, that these are so popular. I had people telling me they wouldn't vote because they had the machines. So my question is, in this section where they have this carve out, if we were to amend this and put in there that a voter had the right to ask for a paper ballot, you can keep the machine, but they have a right to ask for a paper ballot. How would you feel about that?
Clerk Lee.
Chairman Knapp, Representative Brown. Laramie County did that for a number of years. I believe I testified to that in a previous bill where there was a period from like 2006 through 2014 where they offered voters the chance how they wanted to, the method they wanted to cast their ballot on. And since overwhelmingly voters chose to use the equipment, the county clerk then made the decision to, only have that method. So those who wish to vote on pen and paper could go the absentee route.
Some would call that disenfranchisement. Follow up?
All right, well, I can appreciate your answer, but my question is still, if we were to amend that, would you have a problem with them having that in there? Because I'm gonna be real honest, I can't support this bill without our county being able to have paper ballots.
Clerk Lee?
Chairman Knapp, I understand. I would have to evaluate that in terms of how we would do that operationally, because it would be difficult to know how many paper ballots to order and have on hand. So those operational issues would be quite challenging.
So I have a question, I guess, that goes along with that, because you mentioned uniformity, right? How many precincts do you have in your county?
Chairman Knapp, we have 40.
40? Would it be difficult, I think I heard you say, if one of those precincts decided to use paper ballots instead, because that was the preference of those people in that particular precinct? Would that be difficult for you to manage?
Chairman Knapp, Laramie County uses vote centers, so that would be difficult because we have all 40 precincts at
Okay.
each location.
So you can imagine, we're trying to get to a place where 23 counties, understandably, and I respect this very much so, that clerks are elected officials and it is your choice to how you facilitate an election. But we're trying to write statute here. And statute's important when it comes to uniformity, I think. And just as it would be difficult for you to manage a county with one precinct operating differently because of options, I guess you would say, it makes it difficult for us to support legislation that does the same thing statewide, where we have one county that decides that they want to do something differently out of convenience. Can you understand that?
Chairman Knapp, yes, sir. However, I would say this is not, convenience is not our issue. Accuracy and accountability are our issues.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Malcolm. Is that right? I have a question.
Out of the room.
I have a question for you. I did not get all of your changes, and I think it's kind of important as I'm going through all of these pages. So I don't know how you want to get those, but I would really prefer that.
Mr. Chairman, I can and I do apologize. We failed to catch these on the Senate side, and I really do apologize for that. Our intent is not to take multiple bites at the apple. We try to get it right and then be able to get up and say that this is it. But Mr. Chairman, those 4 that I mentioned really are fairly simple, I believe, and I can restate them if you like, but I would also be willing to get them written down before we leave here tonight.
Absolutely. They're somewhat technical changes, and so if we can restate them at the point of amendments and you wish to do that, we can, or we can add them on the floor, so. Follow up?
I got that. Thank you.
Okay. Minority Leader Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Clerk Lee, I think just maybe to follow up on what Representative Locke was trying to get at, because we don't have experience with the ballot marking devices in our counties. Or, I mean, I think we have one in Teton County, I just never used it. What does the full process look like? So they go to the desk to get checked in at with the volunteer that has the e-poll book. And then they get the little printout with the sheet that has a barcode. They go to the express vote machine that scans their barcode on their little sheet. Then they get their ballot on the machine. They choose all their options on the machine and then say vote, I guess, or print out, or what happens. And then the ballot comes out as a card with the barcodes, but then also every position that they voted for and the person that they voted for, and then that goes into a different machine? Is that the whole process?
Clerk Lee?
Chairman Knapp, Representative Yin. Yes, and I will say that a voter has two opportunities to review their ballot before they cast it. They can review it on the screen. They can then change their mind if they say, oh, I didn't want that one, I wanted that other one, or, they can change it on the screen. And then they review it again, and then they can print it. And they look at the printed copy and verify again, yes, those are the choices I made. After which, they go and insert it into the tabulator. And the tabulator is the same tabulator used for the full face ballots. It's the same software, tabulates both kinds of ballots. And does that help?
Follow up?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I mean, I think we just needed to hear what that looked like. And so I think Clerk Irvin said that he believes that's more secure because you can't have half-marked bubbles. You have the barcode, and that's would be your statement as well, Clerk Lee?
Clerk Lee?
Chairman Knapp, Representative Yin, yes, the system will not allow you to overvote. It will not let you pick. In other words, if the instructions say vote for one, it will not let you choose two, because when you choose two, what happens? Your vote doesn't count for that race. And I will again invite you to look at the Secretary of State's website where they have the election results, and look at your county and see how many overvotes your county has for various offices. And I will say, I did notice, Chairman Knapp, Campbell County has many, many overvotes. And so those are votes that would have made a difference in an election. I would almost guarantee it. Laramie County, by contrast, especially given our population, we have far, far fewer overvotes. And that is because of the system we use. The overvotes we do have come from the absentee ballots.
We just have a lot of people that like filling in bubbles. So, I have a question just out of curiosity. So the tabulators, the touchscreens, they're tested obviously every year, correct? We have service agreements that we have with the manufacturers. In those service agreements, why aren't we given the coding? Or why aren't we given something that we could say we can use in an audit purpose? There are service agreements, we pay a lot of money for them. I'm just curious why that's never been granted to the state or the counties.
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. And I think that I would actually defer to the Secretary of State's office on that one, because the question of what systems are certified for use really comes from their office. And then the Board of County Commissioners chooses amongst those systems which is to be deployed. Currently, there's one system authorized for use in Wyoming, so it made the choice fairly easy for county commissioners. They were given one, they took one. And so, Mr. Chairman, I would actually defer that specific question to the Secretary.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here and testifying. My question is I know that the ES&S machines are from, they're in Nebraska, right? Have either of you requested or gone over there and looked through the plant and maybe even, because there's a lot of questions that I have heard about and there's been testimony about, and I know Clerk Lee, you've been part of listening in on this as well as the County Clerks Association too, about the machines not being accurate, or what can we see into them? What makes them so special that they wouldn't show them to us? Have you been able to request that meeting with ES&S in Nebraska?
Clerk Lee or Malcolm?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Weber, ES&S has actually offered that to us numerous times, and at the state level as well. We have not taken that invitation yet, but I do think that that would be a great step for us to take, to be able to actually go see that where they're manufactured.
Follow-up?
Yes, follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that answer. I would certainly like to be invited when that happens. And my follow-up question for you, sir, is why haven't you not taken that up?
Mr. Chairman, as Representative Weber knows very well, no offense to anybody else on that dais, but better than all of you, she knows how many hats a county clerk wears. She wore them at one time herself. Really, it's just been an issue of time. And I know one of the bills you talked about during this session was House Bill 215, which would have eliminated electronic voting equipment. And I don't want to get too off topic, but one reason we worked so hard on the hand recount component in this bill was we heard those same concerns from folks, but didn't think the full measure was the right approach. We believed this measure was the right approach, if that was the will of the legislature. So that's why we worked so hard to get this right. I think it's telling how there were no questions about the recount provisions and the hand recount. I think that means we nailed it. And so, Mr. Chairman, this is part of our attempt to give the public more confidence that those systems are accurate. And again, that interim topic of testing and auditing, those things that we can do to show they are in fact secure and accurate. I don't think that was the question, but I took some liberty.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any members of the public that wish to testify? I know we're going late, but this is our last bill of the committee, so if we just savor this and all right, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Marguerite Herman here for the League of Women Voters. And this is sort of just like the olden days when committees met on adjournment and these long nights, which I don't think were a particularly good idea, but they were routine. And so I'm glad they're a rarity, only used when necessary. So thank you. I'll just be very brief. Actually, I'm just going to address one particular part of the bill because it is kind of an omnibus bill. But the thing that I would like to talk about is the continued shortening of the early voting period. And I know the original bill had 14 days, 2 weeks. And it has been expanded to 3 weeks, but I'm here to argue, as the clerks do, to restore it back to the 4 weeks, which is still half the time it used to be 2 years ago for early voting. And because early voting is so important in Laramie County that it's at the courthouse, and a lot of people throughout the county come to Cheyenne to work, to shop, to recreate, and a lot of people vote at the same time. And I can tell you, it's rare to see lines out the door and around the corner at our courthouse, yet day after day I would see them. And so obviously there was a lot of people who wanted to use it for whatever reason. Now, when I was doing door-to-door campaigning myself, there were a handful of people who said, no, I must vote on the day of. They were the rarity. A lot of people think that convenience, it's not just a convenience, maybe that's their only opportunity. So I'm asking you to restore that 4th week. There were 17,500 people used that early voting. That's a large number, and to compress that into 3 weeks would mean longer lines, harder job for the clerk's office, and the only reason I have heard to do that would be that it was a convenience for the campaigners, for the politicians. And I would just submit to you that weighing the two areas of convenience and access, that I would favor the direction of giving 4 weeks for people to get out there, and the convenience. And anyone who has little kids or a busy business schedule, you pick your day and you try to go, and having 4 weeks access to those early voting would really be a help. And it may be the difference of people who end up voting or not. So 17,500 is a large number of people, as an expression of how that is a favorite thing. So that's on page 12 again, and the clerk suggested that. I'm endorsing that wholeheartedly. So that's all I have to offer today is just, it's an important piece of access to the ballot. And if you have any questions.
Good evening, Chairman and committee. So I already warned you about this, so I don't want anybody having a heart attack. I'm actually on and for this bill, so just to cover that. HB 190, and the reason that I'm for this is not because I believe the underlying concerns. I still believe that the underlying concerns need to be addressed by education, but it's really clear that we're never going to get off this unless we address what those concerns are that have been raised. So it covers the three most emotionally charged issues around elections that have driven a portion of the population, a very loud portion of the population, to have concern. That's the proof of U.S. citizenship, paper ballots, and hand recounts, including recount criteria. So what this does is in a single kind of elegantly presented, cohesive presentation of those election integrity concerns in a way that ensures that there is no disconnection in the presentation of addressing these. I too would prefer that it remain at 28 days, but as long as it is not less than 21 days, the lines winding around in the courthouse, that happened in Sheridan County as well. I voted early because I was on the ballot, so I voted early, and there is a way. It is very, when you look at the number of absentee ballots, they are significantly because of early ballots rather than mailed in or dropped. I'm not going to bring that up because it'll, anyway, that are mailed in. I want to address the idea of an omnibus. An omnibus is derived from Latin, and it's a proposed law that covers a number of diverse or unrelated topics. I would say that characterizing this as an omnibus bill is inaccurate and misleading. So I would just ask you to set that aside. This is about election integrity as it's been brought up over and over again this session. So then, you know, I think that what you're charged with now on this last evening before the last day of coming out of committee is to what degree are you as legislators and as representatives of your body, at what degree are you committed to having, however not completely perfect, to having a bill that addresses these issues? And so the reality is that this bill incorporating these election integrity items it's really the best way to get there. You don't have to solve everything perfectly all at once, as long as the bill that you pass doesn't create more problems than it solves. So I would say, while you may not think it's perfect, I would say that it is a huge step in the direction that so many people have identified. And then I finally want to just end with a single quote from Harry S. Truman. "It is amazing what you can accomplish if you do not care who gets the credit." So I would urge you to pass this bill and show that, in fact, the election integrity, you're moving this further towards where you may want it to be at the end. And I stand for questions.
Question? Thank you, Chairman Knapp. Thank you for being here, Ms. Simmons. So I've heard you in quite a few meetings for elections, and I am very curious as to what made you change your mind about this bill versus the other bills, 215, 245, 190, 232, 249.
Yes.
Representative Weber, the
The reason that I've changed, and it's not like I want to do a huge endorsement of this, it truly is being pragmatic about moving from where we are now to a place that people have expressed a concern with, and having this demonstrate to people that it's there. What is different about this is that it accomplishes this in the least disruptive manner. It accomplishes it in a way, so for example, on the hand counting, it keeps it, again, just to hand counting on the recounts. It takes the 1% and takes it to 2%. So it accomplishes this, again, as I said, I think least disruptive manner to the processes of the clerks who are the ones who actually administer the elections. So I am reluctant to get up on my high horse and say I'm not going to be for any of this when I think that this is a pragmatic answer to the concerns that people have expressed.
Follow up.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Ms. Simmons, thank you. And I appreciate your honesty on all of that. With a lot of the changes, with a lot of the amendments, I didn't hear you talk about that too much. How are you in favor of the amendments that have been offered? There's been quite a few.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Simmons.
Representative Weber, the amendments that are being proposed by the clerks, which are cleanups to make sure that they can continue to administer it properly, absolutely for. I am against any other amendments to this. First of all, because it is at this late date. If I understood one of the amendments, it really throws a wrench in the works. And I believe, again, that if you adopt the broader amendments that are there, then you're going to be trying to get 2/3 approval to get something in next year, instead of having something, while not perfect for everybody, is, I don't want to use adequate, meets the minimum needs.
Thank you. Follow up. Any other questions for Ms. Simmons? No, thank you very much for your testimony. Mr. Shuck, how are you doing? If you could introduce yourself and give testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Brian Shuck. I serve as general counsel for the Wyoming Republican Party. I'm an attorney here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Have been practicing for over 30 years. And election integrity, excuse me, election integrity is something that I've spent a lot of time on over the last 5 years. I had the privilege of being invited to go down to Arizona to work with the RNC and Trump's team on election integrity during the 2020 election, and had the opportunity to supervise a number of poll watching locations and work with those poll watchers. And then when I was done with that, I was invited to come and work in the war room in Phoenix for the next 5 days. So so I'm very, in addition to that, we have litigated several election cases over the last 4 years, and have been very successful in all of those for the Wyoming Republican Party. So the first thing I would tell you about this bill is, Representative Weber, you're asking a very good question. So why is it that certain people are supporting this bill when they didn't support any of the other election bills? I think that's exactly the issue you need to be asking. I do agree with Ms. Simmons that this is not an omnibus bill. This makes changes scattered throughout the bill, throughout the election code, but it in no way begins to cover all of the good bills that you have already done very good, very hard work on already. And those bills have been vetted by the Wyoming Republican Party. They've been vetted by the Secretary of State, which is what should happen to every election integrity bill. And I can't say that for this bill. This one came out of left field. I had not seen it before it was introduced. I would have seen it if it had been offered to the party to take a look at. And we had not seen this. So I think the path going forward would involve in the future, making sure that the interested parties have an opportunity to review the bill before it shows up. I've spoken with Kathy Russell, our executive director for the Wyoming Republican Party, and she and I are in agreement that there are platforms, there are resolutions that all support all of the other good election bills that you have worked on. This one doesn't address any of those issues. And in the world of election integrity, there are some pretty important issues that need to get addressed, that are hot button issues. This doesn't address any of them. This is window dressing. To be very candid, this is window dressing. It's intended to make it look like somebody did something about election integrity where it really doesn't accomplish anything. I agree with you, Representative Brown. You had mentioned that you are not hearing from your constituents and those that you talk to that the election machines in Laramie County are popular. I hear the same thing. I've been voting in this county for 27 years, and I don't ever remember being offered a paper ballot. It may be that what they have done in Laramie County is the default has been the machines, and that's what you get pushed towards, and you got a paper ballot if and only if you asked for it. That may be how that was handled, but that's no measure. If that's how it was handled, that is no measure of how popular those machines are in Laramie County. To address one of the issues that Representative Johnson brought up, so the names do appear on the ballot piece of paper that gets printed out, but the names don't correspond with the barcodes. There's name, and then barcode, barcode. I may have that backwards. It's one or the other, but you can't tell whose is which. You can't tell. So I think one big problem in this bill is it talks a lot about paper ballots, and that's great. But I think one of the bills you've already worked so hard on says pen and paper. Leaving out the word pen is a problem. There are a great many people in Laramie County that do not necessarily trust those machines. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Shuck, for being here. I appreciate your testimony. I know you have been all across the state and obviously a big part of the nation too. The issues that we are having in Wyoming with election integrity related to the voting machines or even hand counting, have you seen that across the other states that you've visited? And I know that it seems to me where I'm at in the northern part of the state, this is a big population down here, and there may be some problems here that we don't have in the smaller communities. But it seems like I'm hearing some election insecurity questions that keep coming up around the machines and timing, and if we keep elongating, whether it's increasing the absentee ballot times or not strengthening up the ID laws. Is that what you're hearing nationwide too when you've been out visiting some of these other places?
Mr. Shuck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I get an email once a week from the RNC outlining all of the various new election laws that have been passed, the litigation that has been going on, and back in 2020, I tell you what, that was a lot. But it has not stopped since then. In fact, it has escalated up because most people now understand how important election integrity is. So hand counting is absolutely an issue nationwide. And that needs to be something that the state of Wyoming embraces once again, to not do a hand count in a recount situation and insist that you're going to use the same machine that came up with that number the first time is the definition of insanity, right? You're just doing the same thing and expecting different results. So, so yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I'm hearing nationwide.
Follow up? Any other questions? Minority Leader Ian.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Shuck. So you said that the other bills were vetted by the Wyoming Republican Party. I generally don't vet my legislation with my state party. I'm curious on why you think that we need to vet it with the state party. I get vetting it with the Secretary of State. He has to administer it. I'm curious on why we need to vet it with the state party.
Mr. Shuck.
You don't have to, but if you want the Wyoming Republican Party to support it, I think it would be a good idea. The Wyoming Republican Party represents more than 70% of the people in the state of Wyoming. So, and as you know, it makes up more than 70% of this body. So it's not a bad idea.
Follow up?
I guess the other thing I would say is after 2020, it became very clear to me from our chairman that my number one priority was dealing with election integrity issues, so that what happened in 2020 did not happen again in 2024. So there are more resources put into this issue through the Wyoming Republican Party, whether it's at the national level or at the state level, than any other party. No other party is committed to it like the Republican Party.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shuck. And before I ask this question, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to say this may sound like a facetious question. It's not. This is a very serious issue that we're talking about here tonight. And so, Mr. Shuck, I would like to ask you, when you look at one of the ballots that comes out of the machines, can you look at that barcode and tell me that that barcode matches what's on that ballot?
Mr. Shuck.
Mr. Chairman, I can't. I can't.
Follow up?
No, thank you. I think
Okay.
that's it.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Is there anybody else in the room that wants to partake in some comment? Anybody online?
Mr. Chairman, we have 3 individuals online. I can admit them now.
Okay.
Our first is Elena Campbell.
Hello, if you could introduce yourself. Can you hear us okay?
Well, this is Elena Campbell. I'm not sure if I'm the one you wanted to address.
Yes, you're up. We're eager to hear your testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and the committee members. First, I'll say that I think you guys are the best of all of the committee members that I've seen throughout this entire session. So I'm super happy to be talking to you. I have so many comments in regard to all of the testimony I've already heard, but I do want to say that the bottom line is our ability to recount our ballots. We must unequivocally be able to recount what those machines are doing, and this bill allows it. I do understand our wonderful lawyer, Mr. Shunt, for his comments. He's very concerned that this doesn't go far enough. I understand that. I think this is also a weak bill compared to the 215 or 217 that we had in front of our committees. Nonetheless, this is our last prayer for any sort of reconciliation for what those machines are doing relative to what hand counts might show. We have to allow it. We must be able to go forward. I hope very much that we'll explore this further in our interim committees. You guys are going to be wonderful with a interim joint committee of with you guys and over on the Senate side. Please allow this to go forward. Our machines truly cannot be trusted unless we're allowed to reconcile with hand counts. It's very simple. Let us reconcile. And so I'll stand for any questions because there were so many comments listening to testimony this evening. But I do appreciate you guys very much. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Are there any questions from the committee? Nope. Thank you for your testimony. Next
Mr.
person.
Chairman, I will admit Jenny DeSaro.
Jenny, what's her last name there?
DeSaro.
DeSaro, okay.
Yes.
DeSaro. She's testifying.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'm Jenny DeSaro with the Equality State Policy Center. We are a nonpartisan organization, nonprofit that is committed to ensuring fair elections and transparent government in Wyoming. We were started over 30 years ago by Wyomingites. Certainly, many of us in the room would, who work in the election space, would have preferred to see early drafts and help shape them before we all ended up here in committee, perhaps next year. But this year is a record setter for election bills. We have strong concerns that this relatively new legislature does not fully comprehend the vastness and the details nested within Title 22. Furthermore, with no one having a clear understanding of the consequences of the myriad of possible changes that may become law before the session is over, we urge this committee to spend time during the interim to better understand Wyoming's election code, take some field trips, and ask more questions prior to proposing future changes. Rather than bringing the clerk's draft bills to review and improve so they can administer, let's take time to start with asking these 23 experts who oversee Wyoming's elections where they would like to see improvements and for what issues do they seek solutions. Although this bill has some positive measures, we respectfully ask this committee to take pause on this bill and engage in proactive dialogue with the clerks prior or during the interim to seek to increase eligible voter participation while also maintaining Wyoming's already accurate and trustworthy election system. However, If you move this bill, we support the amendments brought by the Clerks Association and the restoration of the early voting period to 28 days. I stand for questions.
All right, thank you. Representative Weber.
Thank you, Chairman Knapp. Thank you, Ms. DeSaro, for being here. I know you've been in many of the meetings on election integrity. And, I understand what you're saying about the putting it into an interim topic and getting the input from the other 23 counties. I know that of the times that you've been in here, there's been many of the comments made by county clerks and community members. And, I think there's been a big push for election integrity. And what do you think in your county that people would say?
Mr. Sorrow.
Could you clarify what they would say about
election
what?
integrity. Thank you, about election integrity.
Well, I live in the Park County, but my organization actually represents all counties we have members and our statewide organization. And I think that actually, I don't have the study up, but the University of Wyoming did a study that polled Wyomingites in November about how they felt the elections were run, and it was over 90% felt that they were confident in and that they trusted their elections. I can send you that study if you would like. So I think that there's another study, it's by Pew. And again, I don't have that on hand. I just am pulling it from recall. But in that one, it shows that people actually have a very high level of trust in their own local election. So when you ask them what they trust their county. And then their level of trust decreases as they go farther away. So most people have high trust in their local election, and then they have greater distrust in the elections that happen in the neighboring state. And I can show you that research if you would like. Just
follow up, Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. DeSaro. Yeah, I would love to see that University of Wyoming poll. And just as a follow-up question to that, how many people did they poll in that? Or
it was 500. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman. It was about 500 or somewhere between 500 and 600. And it was intensive where they make phone calls randomly throughout the state. So it's just random calls. It was done by the University of Wyoming.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
And the last person online?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark Kep will be joining us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll receive your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark Kep, Crook County, Sundance, Wyoming, coming to you from North Carolina right now where I'm working on a project. But I stayed up late and I got an early flight because this is an important issue. What I want to start with is House Bill 232. Actually left the committee on January 17th. Guess what date this bill was introduced at the Senate on? January 17th. Interesting. So we're told this is not an omnibus bill, but it is an omnibus bill. And what I want to encourage you with right now, and because I'll be the last person talking here today potentially, is take the time to amend this bill and make it right. If the Senate is demanding that this be the election bill, let's make it a good election bill. Let's get the drop boxes in this bill. Let's not let them slide through and destroy all that time and energy you already spent by swiping this thing in here. I'm not a super big fan of it. The wrong folks are on the side of this bill. There's been some good commentary so far in regard to it. So first off, add the Dropbox amendment into here. The one thing I do want to point out in this bill, and I'll suggest an amendment on it, is there's section 22, and I don't have page numbers because I'm online, so I don't know what page number it is, but it's section 2216.110, specifically how a candidate may obtain recount where affidavit is filed. I think I've identified why so many people are for this bill. A candidate may obtain a recount of votes for the office he is seeking by making and filing an affidavit alleging that fraud or error occurred in counting, blah, blah, blah. The catch is the alleging that fraud or error occurred. The problem with that language is that you're filing a legal affidavit alleging fraud. The problem is by doing so, you potentially put yourself into a perjury situation where you are filing an official affidavit. And if you knowingly make false claims about fraud or error, that could be subject to perjury charges. The trick is knowingly, right? So somebody could say, well, you knowingly did it, and now we're going to file a claim against you. So catch one. Catch two is you could be sanctioned for filing a frivolous claim if you're caught in doing it, which I guess that would make sense. But you also, because there's an affidavit, the language isn't really clear in this bill right now, but you could be on the hook for more than $5,000. Who knows? They could come after you and sue you because they claim that you knew you cost them $20,000 or whatever they think it costs, and all of a sudden you're on the hook. So I think that's the catch right here, is that this really isn't a hand recount bill. This is a hand recount bill that's not really that. So what I would advise you to do is amend in section A there and remove where it says alleging that fraud or error occurred. Strike that. So your affidavit simply says, I want a hand recount of my election in the county area, and that would help alleviate potential legal liabilities of somebody filing for that. Otherwise, I do encourage you passing something. I'm just disappointed with how this is handled. The flip side is you can become hardcore on this and just say, no, we've already passed our bills. The Senate needs to move those, since the Senate actually had those bills before they even brought these up. So I appreciate your time. I stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions? Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sadly, I did not catch this gentleman's name.
My name is Mark Kep.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Minority Leader Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So, Mr. Cap, if you look at House Bill 232, which is the hand counting for recounts, it has the same language. The way bill drafts are structured is this is existing language, and then the underlying text is the new language. So there's no change on that part in our current existing statutes.
Is there a question in there? Just comment. All right. Any other questions? Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to comment. I was not in support of 232, and I'm really not in support of this. I was more in support of another bill that did not even get out of committee, and that was for random hand count audits of precincts. But there was a procedural error that bill did not get through. In the end, we want a hand count ability to be able to identify if there is fraud. That's the catch right now. We don't know if there's fraud with the machines. We have no idea. Well, actually, I take that back. We do know there was fraud, because the one hand count that happened in Weston County found massive errors in the election that was counted by the machine. So we already know it exists. So this affidavit may be null and void, because I think anybody in the next election could file a $5,000 claim simply saying, hey, there was fraud obvious in Weston County, therefore I want a hand count. But I'm just pointing out that this, even if it is existing language, we are now adding on a significant change to that language. And if we're going to do that, we might as well make the language accurate so people don't find themselves in legal liability simply because they want a free and fair election.
All right, follow up? Any other questions? All right, thank you very much for your testimony. Thanks for the flight and staying up, and we appreciate it.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, any other public comment? We'll give you one more small nibble.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that, and I understand it's late, and so I'll be quick. I want to go back with, if it's okay, to Representative Brown's proposal on page 2. Sometimes it's hard up here. You get a thought, think it on your feet, you recoil, and you come back. Mr. Chairman, we think Representative Brown has a really good compromise there. that it would allow Laramie County to continue the way it's operating, but also not prohibit an elector from asking for and receiving a traditional bubble-filled ballot. And so, Mr. Chairman, what it would look like, just to walk through, is page 2, line 16, keep the language who choose to use them.
I'll probably say-
I'm sorry, Mr.
Go ahead.
Okay, and then you would insert, provided an elector may also choose not to use the ballot marking device. And in return, one of the amendments we proposed was strike on line 20, starting at nothing through line 23. So what that would do, in our opinion, Mr. Chairman, is accomplish what we think Representative Brown was seeking, was that a county could still use the ballot marking device, an elector could choose to use it, but an elector could also choose not to use it. And so, Mr. Chairman, we just wanted to give an opportunity. We had some thought, we think that's a great compromise in that section.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I would like to ask you is, can we go just a step further with this and say that the county notifies people that those paper ballots are available? Because if they don't know they're available, they're not gonna ask for them. So at the polling places, can we put something in here that says that they are notified that they have a choice between a paper ballot or a machine?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think we can work on that, certainly. And I don't know, because it's so late, maybe that's what, and I hate to ask for some trust, but that we could work with Representative Brown for a committee of the whole amendment or at some point. But we would certainly be happy to work with you on that.
All right. Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's a great idea.
Well, he had it.
Yeah. So I was going to ask if you would please provide us with your suggested amendments in writing. We'll work them on the floor if that's what it takes, but it is late and I don't want to miss anything because you did present them in a great way. So thank you for that.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Chairman, if there's a will to have a hand count component in the election, this is our last chance. And so our job, what we see, is to help you get to the finish line if that's the will of the legislature. So we're earnest in attempting to assist you in that.
Thank you. Yes, Representative Lucas.
Thank you. I've lived in Laramie County for over 23 years and I've never been offered a paper ballot. And I've took my disabled mother to vote and had to ask for a paper ballot for her. So I know it's recollections vary sometimes, but I never did.
Thank you. All right. To wrap this all up, we'll give President Beitman last shot here to, yes.
Bite? Man,
There's
I-
nothing left but one bite.
We'll take the scraps. All right, Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you for your good work. You guys are doing a great job on this. I just wanted to bring up a couple things. I will strongly push back on the assertion that this is window dressing. That's offensive. This bill is substantial. Read it for yourself. I mean, this codifies paper ballots as the default method for all in-person voting in all elections in Wyoming. The county clerk shall provide all voters with a paper ballot and a process to hand mark the ballot secretly as provided in this election code. That's not window dressing. That's a substantial policy shift from what we have now to what we're trying to do here. The other thing this does that is not window dressing, Mr. Chairman, is mandate validation of United States citizenship when registering to vote. That's not window dressing. It's a big deal. The thing also what this bill does is raises the threshold for an automatic recount from 1% to 2%. That's not pretend, that's not make-believe, that's not window dressing, that's real. And to comment to that last presenter on YouTube, the minority leader is exactly right. He was referring to current statute that says a candidate may obtain a recount of votes for the office he is seeking by making and filing an affidavit and alleging that fraud or error occurred in counting. That's existing law. This bill is not changing existing law. Until you flip over to the next page and notice the new language. So that point he was making, I'm not sure what point he was trying to make. I know there's some jabs thrown around about me probably personally, but all in all, Mr. Chairman, this is a good bill. I'm sorry I didn't run it up the channels at the Politburo to get their blessing on this, but I'm proud of this work. And the other thing I want to touch on was, I kept hearing this originated from House Bill whatever, House Bill whatever. I let it slide during the Senate side, but I will address this, Mr. Chairman. This bill was originated in February of 24. And you can all watch the War Room dated February 15th, 2024. Myself, the Vice President, Naomi Wolf, we rolled out this bill. We missed the cutoff by like a week to get this in last session. I don't recognize any of those House bills being numbered a year ago. So I take offense at that. So all that being said, emotions are high, everybody's tired, everybody's hungry. We all want to get election integrity across the finish line. I'm willing to work with you guys. Those amendments you guys were talking about sound good to me. Let's make it happen. Let's all work together and pull together and stop all the divisiveness. It's getting old. And I encourage an aye vote. Thank you.
Mr. President, I would agree with you. I think, we tried to tackle election integrity from many different angles this session. I think there's a lot of bills out there that don't deal with this. This is one bill that deals with 3 issues that you discussed that we want to get through and we want to get done. And there's other bills out there that do things differently in other areas, actually. So hopefully we can work all together to get what we can get through this session. So with that, committee, what is your pleasure? You two down there. Representative Weber with the motion, Representative Lucas with the second. Okay, let's talk about amendments. Slowly. And I think, do you have a comment on amendments? I'd almost like to go page by page on this one. But Representative Weber, you have a comment?
Thank you, Chairman Knapp. I think there are a lot of amendments, and I think that there are some that we're waiting for in writing. It would be my suggestion that we pass this bill unamended and wait for all the amendments to come in and pass them on the floor. Leave it up to the body. I totally agree with President Beitman's part about we want to get an election integrity bill done right for the people who voted us in. That would be my suggestion.
All right. Any other comments? Minority Leader Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think there are just some cleanups that would be easy that we got from the clerks. I think the other big policy question ones definitely take it to the floor. I don't want to debate them here, but the cleanup ones I will make motions for if that's okay.
All right. And I just have one comment because I do see, one thing President Beitman said that struck me was this: we are trying to codify paper ballots as the default, So I think that's one big policy question that we'll have in amendments going forward, but that's just my comment. All right.
Okay, as a follow-up, Mr. Chairman, yes, I agree. Let's go page by page.
Do you want to try to tackle this tonight with amendments? Or you want to do it on the floor? Committee? Minority Leader Yin?
Mr. Mr. Chairman, there are maybe three that I would run that aren't really the big policy questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, on page 6, so I'll go slowly, page 6, we have line 2. And so this one came from the clerks, where we strike all of line 2 and write showing a place of birth. Replace it with showing a place of birth. So it would read a United States military draft record showing a place of birth. And we heard from the clerks that the selective service registration card can be held by immigrants, and we want to make sure it proves citizenship, right? So that's my motion for that one.
Okay, so we have an amendment on line 2, striking that and adding showing a place of birth.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of that amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. That amendment carries. Next up.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think the next one is on page 12. This one came from Ms. Lee. It is strike the word public on line 2 and strike the word public on line 10. And that would be the motion.
All right, that's pretty clear. Do we have a second for that amendment? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of that amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, no. That amendment carries.
Mr. Chairman, the last one is on page 24. And so let's make sure that I get this right. It is on line 11, strike or required by, strike the rest of the line, starting with or. And then on line 15, insert it before the comma. That language that we strike on line 11. And this is the language that Representative Harrelson brought on the other bill, House Bill 232. It's the same language being moved in the same place.
Representative Weber? Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't look down there. Representative Lucas, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Floor Minority Leader Yen, did you say to insert that before the comma on line 15?
Minority Leader Yin.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is correct. I'm going to bring up the amendment just so I have that language correct. Yeah, so it would read, if the recount is initiated by the Secretary of State under WS 2216-109D or required by WS 2216-109B. And this is the exact same language that was in the amendment that was brought by Harrelson on the floor with his bill.
All right, we have an amendment. We have a second. All those in favor of that amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. That amendment passes. Okay, so actually I misspoke. I think there's two policy questions here. One, and I'm looking at those supplied by the Secretary of State's office, and one was on ballot drop boxes. And one was on the default for Laramie County. Do we want to, does anybody want to add those amendments tonight? All right. Go ahead and make your amendment motion.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to start with the amendment. Looks like this. Everybody sees it. Let's go to page 2, line 16. And I want to make sure to get this on my copy as well. After, on line 16, after used by, delete electors who choose to use them, and insert persons with disabilities. And there are two amendments. Do you want to just take one at a time on this page?
Let's put those both together since it's
Okay.
written on one page.
Did everybody get that? And it was handed out. Okay, next one, page 3, line 2. After, as used in this section, we would be inserting a colon and begin the new line with an I, small I in parentheses. Disability has the meaning stated in the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, comma, as amended by the Americans with Disabilities Amendments Act of 2008, semicolon, quote, and this is, and is not part of it, and we will insert the next subsection, double I in parentheses, and insert double I before the next or the next little subsection, starting with electronic ballot marking device. Okay.
Is there a second?
A second.
Representative Brown. All right, you've heard the amendment and we have it written, so all those in favor of that amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries for that amendment. And do you have one more?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, that last amendment, rather lengthy. I can't write quite that fast, but I'm just curious if it was on the first handout from the Secretary of State's office.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
And we can, and you can say, just adding the clerk's second amendment, or the Secretary of State's second amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would propose that we add the Secretary of State's second amendment. Starting with, do I need to go into all of it, Mr. Chairman? Line by
No.
line, step by step?
I think you can just say as written.
As written.
Okay, second.
Is there a second?
Okay, Representative Lucas, so that amendment is as written. All those in favor of that amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Are there any other amendments? Question having been called, we are voting on Senate File, what are we voting on? Senate File 190 as amended. Please take the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a roll call vote on Senate File 190, Election Transparency. Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Locke.
Aye.
Representative Heft.
Aye.
Representative Johnson.
Aye.
Representative Lucas.
Aye.
Representative Webb.
Aye.
Representative Weber.
Aye.
Representative Yin.
No.
Chairman Knapp.
Aye.
Chairman, you have 8 ayes, 1 no.
With that vote, Senate File 190 engrossed with amendments does pass. Is there anything else to come before the committee? Committee, thank you very much for working late, and for those who testified, thank you. For those online, thank you. We appreciate it. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.